What's up, Descendants? Now, I want to get into my top 5 tips for casuals to help them with maximizing their time, but also to help prevent a lot of mistakes. If you are new into the game, tip number 1, we're just going to start off with your characters, right? I feel like the best decision you can make as a casual, if you have less time to put into the game, is taking whatever character you decide to pick, it doesn't matter who it is, but making that character accessible to either boss or farm with them. One of the best decisions that I personally made on my account was that I utilized my character for that. So I started out with Blair, and not only was I able to use him for bossing, but I also used him for being able to farm. And one of the things that I constantly talk about, and we could just take my Lepic for example, when we look at the module slots, I always try to keep open one of the slots. So all the slots that have been socketed, for example, are all highlighted the number in green. But the two here at the end is so that one, I can swap out the Transcendants for an entirely different build. And then also two, for the last slot, that's to allow me to be able to say, you know, maybe go for more immunity for resistances, or to maybe go for more DPS or duration or whatever it is that I'm trying to aim for. So that is something that I feel like is going to be the most lucrative for those that might not have the capacity or the ability to put in 400 plus hours in the game at this point, like myself. For tip number 2, this is really important for weapons, because I think a lot of people may just overlook this, or maybe might not know. When you're investing in picking weapons, some weapons actually have not only obviously the unique ability that they get because it's an ultimate, but they also might have a negative effect. Because of that negative effect, some people might actually socket or even will mod the gun to counteract that effect, and the gun is still at the base copy. It's really important to make sure that you are working up your guns with duplicates, because this is a lot of the times going to help mitigate or counteract completely that negative effect that the gun has just because it's the base copy. So take, for example, the Python, right? So the Python has a recoil of 30% when you first get it at base copy. But as you put more dupes into it, it will start to reduce that recoil. The same thing is also, like, for example, with the clairvoyance, right? So the clairvoyance actually at base has a unique ability that obviously void gaze, duration, chill res, right? But then when you look at the beam rifle charging speed, it is minus 20%. Now, as you put dupes into it, it will actually bring this down to a 0 value, and then whatever charging speed investment you made will be a positive. But this could also mean that for a different gun, you could have not used that, say, for example, on the other one, which is like, you know, recoil reduction. You could maybe put something else in that slot. And sometimes what this will lead to is that you might have already socketed the slot. And that is a little bit more of a pain for a casual to have to go back and try to redo, versus if you wait and you farm up the necessary dupes on whatever gun that you're investing in. This, of course, gateways me into tip number 3, which is just time management. The first thing I want to start off with before we return back to weapons is the idea of always keeping your research institute with something crafting. I know that there's probably going to be days where you're like, I don't have anything, or I don't feel like I have anything to put in here. But I promise you, you always want to make sure that there is something filled in all 5 of the current craft slots that we have. And the reason why that is because even if you might not need something right now, you're probably going to need it later. Even in situations like this, for example, where I've completed this and I got 2 things that's currently cooking, I usually will try to find something, right, that I can look at and say, like, you know what, I might need this later on. Like, there's even missions in the game that people aren't aware of that need you to invest and build up a certain number of reactors. So understanding that, you might want to say, just have it in the back burner where you already have these resources cooking. Now, some of these have short windows or short timers on them. Try to pick things that would make more sense for the time allotted that you'll be gone. But the other component to this is in terms of time management. And I thought it was kind of funny because I got a shout out to the fam EXO for bringing it up. But one of his friends actually uses a timer for all the things or all the windows for certain things, especially for the crystallization catalyst. And of course, for one of the other big things that you should always try to make sure you're crafting is the energy activators. So setting timers for those, I think, is one of the most efficient ways for you to be able to keep up with it. And I would even argue for the catalyst, that's probably even more important because it's an 8-hour window every single time that one's generating. And that was something that I had to sit with as far as the reality of what a casual is probably doing versus what someone like myself is doing, where I have the ability to expedite the process of crystallization catalysts, whereas someone else that's casual, when they're investing in building a gun, they're not just burning through, the leveling of proficiency just because they're able to just get crystal catalyzation. It might be every 8 to 16 hours, if not more, that they might be doing another module slot, right? So that's something that I feel like is going to be extremely valuable for those of you guys that are trying to, I would say, maximize and min-max the time that you have allotted under that time management window. But this is also something that's really important for your weapons, right? And I made it a point that I was going to come back to that, right? Now, when we're talking about weapons, I think one of the things that I've started to do, and I would even tell you guys this, I used the Nezestra's Devotion the entirety of the game for the 400 plus hours that I've put into the game. This is probably my second gun that I've gone and full sended, and actually it's the first gun that I fully have duped on my account. That, of course, being said, I noticed that when we're talking about the overall result and what's going to make the most sense for the casual player or the average player, you are going to definitely be spending time investing in that one gun. And I think that the way that content is coming out, it is making it much harder because there's always like this next new broken gun for this. And I would try to find the balance, finding a gun that you could start off with that's going to give you that perfect middle ground. You have things like the Greg's Reverse, which is obviously super broken right now, super easy to farm. You have guns like the Thunder Cage, which a lot of people still enjoy and still use. Enduring Legacy, I would say picking one of those and full sending it, right? Like, of course, like I said, getting the dupes is just going to only make the gun better. So that doesn't hurt you, even if that is taking more time away. I think some people think that the more guns they have, the better they'll perform in the game. And that isn't always necessarily the case, because a lot of the guns you'll farm, you're not going to be building them or socketing them with crystallization right away. And it's going to take some time. So I think that this is one of the things that I found to be the most effective, was actually isolating and taking my time and consolidating it into really trying to sit and focus on one thing versus trying to make a whole bunch of things and then none of the stuff really having any or much investment in the first place. For tip number 4, this might sound a little bit cliche, but I think it's really important because, again, this is one of the main things that you're just going to have to do within this game and become a master at it. And it's killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Let's say, for example, I want to farm a crap ton of gold. Now, how can I achieve that but also be accomplishing and doing other things at the same time? So one of the things that I actually like to do personally is Kuiper farm. Kuiper farming is allowing me to not only farm gold, but it's also going to be giving me EXP to the character as well as EXP to the weapon, and really, I would say, pretty respectable quantities. And this is allowing me to not only farm gold, but get EXP, like I said, for the character and for the weapon. You can find these different types of farms in different areas, but each area is going to offer something a little bit better than the other. So maybe in that area, you might not farm nearly as much gold, but you can farm more EXP. Or you might not get as much EXP, but you can farm way more Kuiper in that area. So identifying and isolating what it is exactly that you are trying to mainly get, but then in conjunction finding something else that can also coincide with that. So another thing that I like to do as well is, like, again, bringing it back full circle to the resources that you have to farm. Crystallization catalysts and, of course, your energy activators. I usually try to find spots or locations. So let's take, for example, the energy activator. I try to find spots or locations that would allow me to do more than one thing. So not only would I be able to say, for example, like work on proficiency with my new gun, but I'd also be able to farm up, like, say, the polyatomic ion particle and finding a place for that. There's a ton of different places, and I'm not going to go through every single place for that, but there's a ton of different places that you'll find that'll be able to offer you that. And when you're talking about min-maxing, you don't want it to just be about isolating or trying to grind that one singular thing. It needs to be you constantly finding multiple different things within that singular thing to be able to get more value on your account to kind of stretch your time. For tip number 5, this is by far one of the most important things that I feel like has allowed me to continue to play the game. Playing the game in a way to where I am playing to the beat of my own drum. What I mean by that is essentially is that when it comes down to playing this game, I'm playing it how I want to play it. Not necessarily in the way that everybody else is telling me or saying I should have to play it. And yes, I make guides and stuff like that, but I usually try to emphasize the fact that you guys use that freedom to tweak things to your liking. So if you notice that a gun has too much, lost accuracy, add some. If it's too much recoil and you're not landing most of your shots, add some recoil to, or add some reduction to recoil so that you can land more of your shots. These are the things that you're going to have to get more comfortable with doing in this game, because not every single build is for everyone. And I think that that's something that also is kind of becoming a little bit more predominant in this game, is that what someone prefers or what works for someone isn't necessarily what you're going to prefer or what works for you. Either way, guys, that's going to be my top 5 tips that I want to leave with you guys. And I'm interested to know what your top 5 would be. What would you guys, especially for those of you guys that might have put more hours in the game, what would you advise for players coming in or more casual players to be able to do, to be able to maximize or to min-max their time in this game so that they can not only stick with it, but they can also see some constant, and I would even argue some respectable progression. So that's going to be that with this one, guys. Everyone, stay blessed, take it easy out there, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.